YouTube. In front of me is the world's cheapest 60-volt e-bike. This is the Mototec 60-volt Pro. I've had this bike for a little bit over 3 months now. It's been a fantastic experience, but as you can see, pretty beat up, but it's still completely stock. So I bought this bike back in February. I paid $1,364. I bought it from the Mototec website, and they shipped it to me within a week. So that's basically the basic overview. Now let's get into the features. Starting up front, we have a 14-inch wheel with mountain bike disc brakes. Then above that, there is moto style suspension. Then coming up to the handlebars, we have a half twist throttle with a battery gauge and a kill switch. Then moving on, we got front and rear disc brakes, and these brakes have a brake sensor, front and rear, but you can unplug that and it doesn't throw any codes. Then moving along, we have key switch, and under here there is knobs to adjust the sensitivity and the top speed. I have both of those maxed out. Now moving along, there is a mid-mounted motor that goes into a gearbox connected to a T8F chain, which is powering a 12-inch rear wheel with, once again, mountain bike disc brakes. Then when it comes to the looks of the bike, it has full moto style plastics with a moto style seat, and then a rear shock, and that's basically it. Alright, so I'm 6 foot and 170 pounds, and this is how I look on the bike. So now keep in mind, this is a kid's bike, you know, it's not really intended for adults, but you can still ride them. You're just overloading the suspension a bit. But as you can see, not completely cramped. When I turn, the suspension not the suspension, the handlebars just barely touches my legs, but I can still get to full lock without it being uncomfortable. And then the suspension is also extremely soft because, like I said, it's meant for kids, not adults. But with anyway, that being said, now we're gonna do some jumps, show you how that goes. Alright, so as I was editing this part, I realized that the bars had actually moved while we were filming and they were pushed too far back. And that's why they were hitting my legs, which I didn't realize in the moment. But now that they're actually in the proper position, you can see it doesn't touch my legs at all. So I just wanted to throw that in just to show you, you know, even if you are taller, you still can fit on this with no issues. And yeah, back to the video. So you've just seen how the suspension is completely inadequate for even the small jumps that we were hitting before. But you know, still gonna hit the big one, gotta send it, so let's run that.
Several days later.
Alright, new day, new location. As you can see, we're in the woods. That's my dog, it's getting in the way. But so we're out here, gonna go through a bunch of terrains, hill climb, dirt, rocks, roots, kind of just give you the full like light off-roading experience. So now I'll cut to the hill climb. Alright, out here on the hill climb, as you can see, pretty steep hill, nothing like absolutely insane, but pretty steep. Hopefully this works this time. This is like the 5th try. Alright, that's not right, but whatever. We're gonna go with this one. So now you'll see we're gonna shoot up it from the bottom, no run up. So I'll cut to that. So I mean, as you can see, crushed it pretty easily. You know, it didn't really push it like too hard, didn't overload the motor or anything like that. But we also are on full battery, as you can see, but tire's pretty bald, so kind of evens it out. But there has been times where I've come up through this after it's been like rained on, it's super muddy, or the battery's been low where it hasn't been able to make it. But probably like 8 out of 10 times that I've tried, it makes it up this hill no problem. All right, so just saw the hill climb. Now we're gonna go run through the little woods track, do a little loop in the woods, do a little montage of it. Should be pretty cool, so talk to you after that. Alright, so next day, back in the original location. So now I know you guys are going to be wondering, does this have the power to wheelie? And it does, but I'm not good at it. I don't really have the skill for wheeling. But still, I'm going to just demonstrate how it can pop the front up. So it's like, if you got the skill for it, you'll be able to do it. So. Alright, so earlier in the video I touched on how you can remove the brake sensors and it's fine. So now we're going to demonstrate that, do a little burnout test. So up here, like I said, these are the wires, right? You unplug this one, this is for the front brake, has no issue, you know, still moves, still does everything fine. And then now you're able to Alright, so within my ownership of this bike, there have been some parts that I broke. So the first one was the gears in the transmission. So this, I believe, was manufacturing like defect, because basically it broke within the first 2 weeks of ownership. And I just contacted the customer service on the Mototec website. They sent me a new one. That's been in there ever since. So that's been in there for like almost 4 months. First one broke within 2 weeks. So that leads me to think that there was a defect with that part and it's not a general issue. Then the second thing was actually up here in the stem, the bearing on the lower bearing. The piece that holds all the rolling pieces together just shredded itself and the bearing fell apart and seized. So that I was able to just buy the same bearings on Amazon. It was like 10 bucks, easy fix. But so that's the only parts that well, actually also broke the rear fender because like I looped it trying to do a wheelie, but that was my fault, you know, nothing bad to say about the bike, because that can happen to anyone. But so that's the parts I broke during my ownership. I'd say it's still pretty durable overall, especially because I'm over the advertised weight limit. But yeah, so that's that. Alright, so I mean, you've seen all the footage we have on the bike. Now time to go over the pros and cons from my months of ownership. we'll start with the cons, and really the main one is the suspension. You know, this is advertised as having a weight limit of 150 pounds, so that is a large part of it, considering, like I said earlier, 170, 20 pounds over. But still, I've had kids ride this, and it's still too soft for them as well. So it's like, you know, I don't know what they were going for there, but it's definitely too soft. Then the next one is the battery life. It's nothing too bad about it. I've been able to take like 14-mile round trips and it won't die on me. But by the time I'm getting back, I'm like limping it back because it's like about to be dead. And then the next con is the charging time. If I do like the 14-mile trip, take the battery down to almost zero, it's taking about 4 or 5 hours to get back to fully charged. Not ideal. Then another con would be the fenders. They're slightly undersized, so if you're riding through like mud or water, it's gonna get all over your back, all over your front. It's gonna just get around the fenders. And then the third and final con would be the seat. It's quite small, so if you're like a larger, taller rider, it's like not gonna be long enough for you or like thick enough for you, so it can get uncomfortable sometimes on a longer ride. Now for the pros, the customer service and the warranty is fantastic. Like I said, when I blew out the gearbox, I just contacted the customer support, sent me a new one free of charge. Then another pro is this is the cheapest 60 volt bike. You cannot get another pit bike style, full suspension, 60 volt bike anywhere else for cheaper. The only one that's comparable is the Tudio, and that's more expensive and a 48 volt. So it loses on both fronts. Then also the battery, very easy to remove. You just undo the screws and then pull it out. Then another pro is the handlebars from factory will not hit your legs even if you're taller, like 6 foot, 6'1". So it's great for adults in terms of fitting. And then the power and the torque, you know, even though it's only a 2000 watt, carries you up hills no problem, pops the front wheel up. You know, it's lacking at some points, but it's good enough for like any beginner or kid. So my final thoughts on this would be, overall, I would recommend it, especially if you're buying it for a kid, you are a kid, or you're just wanting to get into e-bikes for the first time. I think this is perfect for a beginner. You know, it's not so crazy powerful that you're gonna just flip out on yourself. It's not neck-breaking speed, you know. It's a nice, comfortable amount of speed, good for getting around. So overall, I really would recommend this bike. It's been awesome to own, had a blast with it. That's pretty much it. That's the video. So thank you guys for watching. Throw a like or a subscribe or whatever. Maybe a comment, I don't fucking know, man. But that's it.